let's discuss now what exactly are the points of issue between the Hazon Ish, Rav Avram Yeshaya Karolitz, and Rav Yechiel Michal Tukchinsky. Remember, the Hazon Ish places the date line approximately 70 degrees east of Yerushalayim. However, he does say that the line follows the seashore. It does not cut through the landmass. That he places the date line on the seashore where the eastern border of China touches the sea. He says everything from the seashore westward is considered part of China, and that follows Yerushalayim, and anything east of the seashore, meaning Japan, would not follow Yerushalayim, would be the next day. And Rav Tukchinsky says that the date line is 180 degrees east and west of Yerushalayim, which is about 35 degrees east of the international date line, because the international date line is 180 degrees east and west of Greenwich, England. And since Yerushalayim is 35 degrees east of Greenwich, England, that also places the date line 35 degrees east of the international date line. So one issue that comes up is the issue of, was it known to the Rishonim, meaning the Balamor and the Kuzari, that there were people living in the Western Hemisphere? Why is that an important consideration? Because if you're saying that the date line was placed 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, it could be because it was believed that that was the edge of civilization, and you're making the presumption that the Western Hemisphere was just one huge ocean that wasn't inhabited at all. But should there be people there, then maybe you would say that the date line should be placed differently. So that is one of the issues that Rav Tukchinsky puts to the Hazon Ish. He says, the Rishonim did not know that there was anybody living in the Western Hemisphere. Had they known that, like what we know today, then the date line would have been placed differently. And the Hazon Ish says, that is not so. There is a Zohar, which I've produced for you on this first page here, that essentially says, I'm not going to read the Hebrew part, but the English of the Zohar, which is found in Vayikra, chapter 10, Perek Yud, the entire civilization inhabits the sphere like a ball, some above and some below, meaning above meaning in the eastern hemisphere, below meaning the western hemisphere. All these beings have their own forms acclimated to their natural conditions. Okay, that's called natural adaptation, but they all live as peoples, meaning that there are people in the eastern hemisphere and people in the western hemisphere according to the Zohar, which, according to tradition, was authored by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a Tana, who was a student of Rabbi Akiva, living in the 160, 170, talking about the 2nd century CE. So if that's the case, that they knew as far as early as that there was an inhabited Western Hemisphere, and still, on top of that, the date line was put 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, would indicate that that should be the case today as well. That we should not consider, or we should consider the entire Western Hemisphere as part of the West. Let's finish the Zohar. In the habitation, when it is light for some, it is dark for others. For these day, for these night. Well, that's true based upon our current knowledge. There is a place that is continuously day except for a short time, and we could say that that's that's in the northern pole region. This secret is known to the wise. So the Hazon Ish says, since the Zohar existed, and since the Zohar says that there were people both in the eastern and western hemisphere, and on top of that, the Rishonim, in view of that, put the date line 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim, it means that the entire western hemisphere can be considered the West. And he says, and by the way, it makes logical because the eastern hemisphere contained Eretz Yisrael, and that's what gave a certain chashivut, importance to the eastern hemisphere over the western hemisphere. The western hemisphere was just simply not that important. Rav Tukchinsky says, first of all, you could say that, I was looking at the issue number 1 when I should have been looking at issue number 2. Okay, so I'm looking at issue number 2 really, then I'll go back to issue number 1. But issue number 2 says, was it known to be shown the Western Hemisphere was inhabited? Rav Tukchinsky answered, is that maybe not. You know, the Zohar, even though we say traditionally it was written by Rishon Bar Yochai much earlier than the 12th or 13th century, but still the Zohar did not have public awareness until after the Baal HaMor and the Kuzari. So it's very possible that nobody knew what the Zohar said until after they lived. Now, if you're going to say, but still, nevertheless, the Rishonim, maybe the common people didn't know the Zohar, but the Rishonim would know about what the Zohar said. It's very possible that they felt that the inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere were not civilized, mainly because they wouldn't be connected anyway to the Eastern Hemisphere, where all the action was going, where all the trade was, and so therefore that's why they set the date line in 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim. But had they known that the Western Hemisphere had inhabitants as civilized as they are, as we know them to be, then they would have set the date line at 180 degrees east and west of Yerushalayim. Okay, so that takes care of issue number 2. But let's step back to issue number 1. Does the West extend 3/4 of the globe? The Hazon Ish says yes. This was a more basic difference between the Hazon Ish and Rav Tukchinsky, and he says it's based upon the Baal HaMor, the Razah, and the Kuzari. And then he says, and simply, the Western Hemisphere is not as important of the Eastern Hemisphere, that it contains Eretz Israel, as I just explained a moment ago. Rav Tukchinsky says, no, the Talmud, upon which the Baal HaMor is based, may not, if you remember the explanation of Rashi, may not be talking about dateline at all. Remember, it had to do with the reliability of witnesses, and Rashi explains it in a way that's completely different than the Baal HaMor. That has nothing to do with dateline. Issue number 3, the Chiddush of the Hazon Ish. Now, the Hazon Ish has a very interesting Chiddush. Let us say, new concept, which is not seen in either the Kuzari or the Baal HaMor, and that is, he says that actually the date line is not really exactly 90 degrees east of Yerushalayim. That if the line cuts through a landmass, then the date line is placed at the seashore. So according to the Hazon Ish, what actually is the date line is the shore where the eastern border of China meets the Pacific Ocean. Okay? He says, therefore, anything from the seashore westward, in other words, mainland China, that follows Yerushalayim, even though you are actually east of the 90-degree line. But it would also exclude Japan, which is offshore. Okay? So that is the Chiddush, the addition of the Hazon Ish. And therefore, according to Hazon Ish, if there are any islands that are within the 90-degree area east of Yerushalayim, they would follow Yerushalayim. And if there's a landmass which falls outside the 90-degree line, it would still follow Yerushalayim because the 90-degree line cuts through that landmass. Rav Tukchinsky says that that concept ought to be considered absurd. Because, now I'm going to show you on the map what the consequences of the Hazon Ish's Chiddush is. Okay, because first of all, you're no longer stressing the importance of Yerushalayim anymore at this point. Now you're stressing the importance of the 90-degree east of Yerushalayim line. Because that's causing a lot more halachic consequences than Yerushalayim itself. Because the line cuts through Russia and it cuts through Australia. Okay, and it goes down the coast of China. So based upon the Hazon Ish, now take a look at this. Okay, the 90-degree line is approximately over here, give or take. It passes through a large section of Russia, Mongolia, China, and it actually, so it actually cuts off the edge of Australia. Okay, so based upon the Hazon Ish, this entire landmass of Russia, all the way to the Bering Straits, and the entire Australia, because the line does pass through the end of Australia, the entire Australia and this area of Russia, all the way to the Bering Strait, would follow Yerushalayim because the 90-degree line passes through it. However, Japan, which is actually closer to Yerushalayim than the Bering Sea and parts of Australia, would be considered the West and hold Shabbos a day later by virtue of the fact that it's offshore from China and that the date line, according to Hazon Ish, follows the seashore of China. According to Rav Tukchinsky, this does not make sense because people in Japan, which is closer to Yerushalayim than somebody, let's say, living on the shore of the Bering Sea up in Russia, they would hold Shabbos a day later, and the people up by the Bering Sea would hold Shabbos a day earlier. And that, according to Rav Tukchinsky, he says, you don't see that all in the Balamor and the Kuzari. This is something that the Hazon Ish came up with. Now, there are other questions that the opponents of the Hazon Ish, presumably Rav Tukchinsky, but this is found in the Kuntras of Shmona Esrei Sha'ot, which is found in the Kuntras of the Hazon Ish. He has a whole list of questions that were put on. I chose a couple of them. One question to the Hazon Ish is, what's so holy about China to make its border the date line? And his response is, when the HI stands for Hazon Ish, nothing is so holy about China. What's important is that the creation of land for people started there. And that's why the Torah places the date line there, not because China isn't so important. And then the second question which is put to him is it not strange to make the West 3/4 of the globe and East 1/4 of the globe? And the Hazon Ish's response is, no, you keep saying that, but that's not important. I mean, the concept of central means central to civilization. God is not interested in dividing the world into equal halves. God is interested in making a community of people, of civilization, and giving them commands. And God was dictating what is the extent of the community, which is tied to Eretz Yisrael and has to observe the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach.